I'm Zoe Elton, and I'd like to thank our sponsor for the closing night, Jackson Square Partners, Ken Broad's company, who've been with us for a really long time. Thank you to Jackson Square. And I'd also like to thank our closing night party sponsors, which is, as you may know, happening in San Rafael. That includes the City of San Rafael, plus the Downtown San Rafael Arts District, which includes Artworks Downtown, the Marin Society of Artists, the San Rafael Downtown Business Improvement District, Youth in Arts, and CFI. And that's a lot of people. We're going to be on the streets of San Rafael. That's a first. We've been on the streets on the square in Mill Valley, and it's nice to get this little balance of having the closing night party in San Rafael this time. You have been seeing, not now, but the QR codes that we've been putting up and talking about the shortfall that we're anticipating at the end of this year, and the matching grant we've had of $100,000. And I am happy to let you know that since the beginning of the festival, thanks to your support and generosity, we have gotten to 62,000. That's amazing. So we are getting towards our match, and I want to thank all of you for your support in that regard, and for your dexterity with QR codes and donate buttons. It's all great. Thank you. And we're going to draw back the curtain in a couple of ways tonight. One is, I just want to give a shout out to some of our staff. Yesterday, some of you may have been here, we had a great screening, and we had a music performance following the screening. But right before the music performance happened, there was a soda spill, and it dripped right down here onto the stage. It could have been a real disaster, but our team here just really took care of it with an efficiency and grace that I thought was just amazing. And I don't know whether you realize, but it's like when this theater is not during festival time, there are two films here, one in this house and one in the house next door. And those will go on for weeks, unless it's Barbie, and then it may be several weeks. But what happens during the festival? Today, for instance, on the weekends, we have 8 shows, 8 different films, 8 different filmmakers, guests. And we time it all by the minute. And I just want to give a shout out to the people who really try and turn these theaters over with so much grace. I just want to see the work that they do and acknowledge that and say, big shout out to the theater staff. Thank you so much. And we get to pull aside another curtain tonight. We have some amazing creatives from the film Maestro, who I would like to welcome to the stage. We have Kristie, Macosko, Krieger, who's a producer. Tell you what, I'll call them all up, and then you can applaud everybody when they're up here. Michelle Tesoro, who's the editor, costume designer Mark Bridges, production designer Kevin Thompson, sound mixer Steve Morrow. Welcome. Great. How many mics are we going to have? Not the errand one. Okay, great. We're going to be sharing mics.
That's fine.
Yeah, that's great. So we'll just take a few minutes with them before we go into the screening of Maestro. We're thrilled to have you here, and thrilled that you've made this extraordinary film. It's like, this is like a gift for closing night, to have a film of this sensibility and quality here. So I'm really glad that you were all able to join us. Michelle, as producer.
Kristie. That's Michelle.
Michelle, sorry.
Michelle's the editor.
Yeah, wait till I get to, I'm going to call all 3 of you Mark, even though I know that's you. It's been a long week. I'm ingesting names. Forgive me. No problem. Having said that, as producer, can you tell us a little bit about the genesis of the film, how this actually got started?
Sure. The project had been in development since 2008. Fred Berner and Amy Durning got the rights to Leonard Bernstein's life from the Bernstein family, and they, set about to make a movie about him and a biopic. And then it was in development for a long time. A lot of movies are in development for a very long time. And then in 2018, Josh Singer, who had written a draft of the script, he brought the movie to Steven Spielberg and I, and we thought, okay, who could play Leonard Bernstein? Bradley Cooper. And we sent the script to him, and he read it in like 3 hours and signed on. And then at a certain point, Steven wasn't going to direct the film anymore, so Bradley had just made a little movie called A Star is Born that had not yet come out. And he said, hey, Steven, if you're not going to direct this film, can I maybe throw my hat in the ring? I'll show you this little film I made called A Star is Born, and you'll let me know what you think. And so we sat down, Josh Singer, Steven, and I, and watched the movie, and 20 minutes into the film, Steven crawled over to Bradley and said, you're directing this fucking film. So then Bradley decided he was going to, at that point we signed him on to direct and produce and write and star in the film. And he wanted to make it not a traditional biopic, but a movie about love, marriage, and family. And so that's how we end up with this Maestro that I think you guys will see tonight, Mike, I hope.
Yeah, that's great.
Can I add one part of that story? I was told by Bradley when Spielberg stood up 20 minutes into the movie, he thought, oh, well, that's it. That's the end of my career. Yeah. Until he was told, so.
Yeah.
And please, feel free to jump in at any point, all of you. Yeah. And then, Michelle, I understand that you actually started working on the film not after it had been shot, but before. What does that mean?
Well, I think it means, I mean, I'd never been that early in the process before. It usually, when they hire the editor, you begin when they start shooting. And actually, you're editing while they're shooting, and then you stay on after everyone has shot it, and you're basically the last person to see the film, which I think I am, but the one that's going to be released. But I came on earlier when he was still casting, they were still working on the scripts, they were still trying to decide what they were going to shoot it on, how they were going to shoot it, what it was going to look like. And, Bradley did a lot of camera tests, and he likes to edit these things together. And we met through Sean Penn. I was working on a Sean Penn film, and I was helping him cut Flag Day. And they're friends, and he, being Sean, told Bradley about me, and he's like, oh, would you like to kind of help me work on some of this stuff where I'm trying to develop this movie? And we created a whole little 30-minute proof of concept of all these ideas that he had, and it was really wonderful to kind of see it start from there and end up here, and what that all meant, and decisions that he made along the way.
We did 3 years of hair and makeup tests, Bradley's.
Whoa.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Bradley worked with Kazuhiro, who designed the prosthetic makeup, and they just honed it and worked until they got it, to be a fully realized human being that you would think was Leonard Bernstein.
Yeah, I mean, when I first saw the film, it really struck me that the details were phenomenal. And, it's rare, and again, this is no spoilers, but it's rare that you really see something you think, wow, the makeup, the way that the whole package of how Bradley has been transformed is extraordinary. Yeah. I mean, and obviously as an actor.
You're looking at a real person. You're not thinking about the makeup, you're saying,
yeah, exactly.
That is Leonard.
Yeah. So let's go into the design a little bit. Okay. Mark and Kevin, production and costume design, respectively. Could you talk a little bit about the inspiration for design? So the film takes place between, late 40s and late 80s?
Yeah, it starts with his debut in 1943 when he was 25 years old.
Yeah. And again, not as a spoiler, but just to note, during that trajectory of time, we see the style of the film change. What were the inspirations for each of you stylistically over that period of those periods of time?
Well, we both went into very deep research to match Bradley's research because he did a really deep dive. There's so much information available in video form and photo form, and then we have access through the family because they gave us permission. And we were able to open their scrapbooks and things like that. I think originally the black and white sections, the idea was that that's how we see the references all the time. So it became a more intimate way for us to look at him. And everything is shot on film, so those decisions were all locked and made really early on, like what you see in black and white and what you see in color. I think going through the different decades and when we introduced color and how we introduced palette and how we showed the intimacy of their lives is something that Mark can add to now with how he did it through the costumes. I'll just say that the main set pieces are their domestic life, which included building the legendary Dakota apartment, and the Osborne apartment that they lived in, and the Carnegie Hill apartment studio that he started in, that Lenny started in. And then also, we used the actual country house in Connecticut that the family still owned. So we were able to glean a lot from that house and the ghosts that were still there that informed our ability to get really deeply inside the emotional aspect of the characters.
Yeah, and basically we just looked at every single picture we could get our hands on of a very well-documented life. And you're finding clues along the way of who these people are, how chic Felicia was from very early age, and how she actually helped Lenny's style improve. And you see after a time, he's on his own and his taste goes a little south, and you're seeing that in all of the research, and you're picking it up, and then you're figuring out how to tell a story with those details of they're chic, they're not, they're at home. This seems like Lenny's turtleneck period. This is, and you're putting it all together to tell a story.
That's great. So let's talk about sound mixing a bit.
Sure.
And if you want to jump in on this as as well,
Good
Michelle.
example.
Just sort of thinking about the latter part of the process, sound mixing for a film that is inherently musical, both in terms of the actual music and the musicality of the way that it's made. Talk a little bit about maybe, how you worked on that with the team.
Bradley and I did A Star Is Born together, and that was live music.
Yeah.
Everything was live recorded on that, and he turned to me and said, okay, we're going to do, Leonard Bernstein's life, and if they're playing music on screen, we should record it live and do it live, or else the audience is going to feel it's fake. And so, that gave us the opportunity, with the years of prep and figuring out the makeup and what the story was and all that, it gave us the opportunity to figure out, well, how are we going to do that in a way that's modern so you can hear it in this beautiful theater, but also so that it's not impeding the story or the speed of production. And so we came up with a good plan. Anytime you see anything on camera being played, they're being played, we're recording it, which took a lot of planning, but that it all came together. And then when it comes down to the musical aspect of telling a story like this, Bradley has all the research and all the music in his head, and him and I sat down for an afternoon and we just went through every single music piece, every single cue he wanted. Even if it's not in the movie as a music cue, we could inform the crew, this is the vibe, this is the feeling of this scene while we're filming it. So we would play it for rehearsals, things of that nature, just have it playing throughout the day, so it would inform a slow camera push-in versus a medium speed or a fast speed, because all those things matter when you're putting it to music. And if you already know what that music is, it's just a shorthand for the whole crew to really get it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the music also, once they did a lot of all that preliminary research was put into the script, decided on, and obviously approved in terms of rights and things like that. So we knew that we were going to use it. But even during post, there was a lot of cues that we would consistently go through as we were cutting to say, oh, what about this cue here and that cue, and I think, and even later on, when we were into the mix, the final mix of it all, we decided, because we were using the needle drops or the source music in the movie, and then there were some cues that we did it live,
Yeah.
and we just felt like there was such a huge difference fidelity-wise, and we decided, oh, we really should record all of these and put it into the film. It made such a huge difference.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where did you record it?
Well, I mean, when we recorded all the material, there's some
Yeah.
in England, there's some in
Oh, right,
New
right, right.
York.
Yeah, yeah.
So the
It's in different
movie-wise,
places.
wherever those are, that's where it's recorded. But
Yeah.
the source music that you hear is more of a, more of a score.
Got it. Yeah,
That
yeah.
was re-recorded in, was that London, LSO?
I think, well, when we did the recording, after we did.
Recording is at Air Studios.
Air Studios, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we've whetted everyone's appetites
very good.
quite enough.
Without spoiling anything.
No spoilers, yeah. Kristie, Michelle, Mark, Kevin, Steve, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy.
Wow. I would like to bring up our guests. I'm going to start with Kristie Macosko Krieger, who's the producer. Kevin Thompson, production designer. Michelle Tesoro, the editor. Mark Bridges, costume designer. And Steve Morrow, sound mixer. I think after this Q&A, we should just make a movie. We have everybody here to do it. This is a magnificent film, and I thank you all for your work on this and sharing it with us. I'm not going to start this traditionally as I would when we talk about, well, how did it develop, and Mr. Spielberg and Martin Scorsese, which are all really great things to know. But after listening, I was thinking about this, and then after kind of listening to you talk at dinner, first of all, this is a love story. It's not a bio. And it seemed to me that you always hear that, filmmakers remember what happened on the set, sometimes more than the film itself. But this is different. There's something about this that I think and I feel that Bradley directing this and everybody being involved and the way the movie is set up, it's complicated. There's different ratio changes. There's black and white to color, and there's all these different things. And my original thought was, how does one, I know you all have your own departments, but what do those things affect other departments and how are you collaborating? But after hearing you speak, I think there was something really special about the kind of set that Bradley put together. And I'd love just, it could be a short or whatever as you like, just to hear from each and every one of you about how you felt that what were those things that created this beautiful film that maybe were a little different than maybe some of the other sets you worked on and the way people approached this film, their films, and different about this. Kristie, would you like to start?
Sure. Producing a film for Bradley Cooper is challenging because he has more energy than any human being on the planet. I've never seen anything like it. And he was very clear about how he wanted to set out to make the movie. And he wasn't going to make the movie until it was prepped fully, completely. He was going to the places where the movie, where actually Lenny and Felicia lived their lives and how they lived their lives. And so that bleeds into production design in a very, very big way. So we had to go to Tanglewood, and we shot in Carnegie Hall, and we shot at Ely Cathedral. So you've got to come up with all kinds of location work. And then when you can't shoot in a location like the Dakota apartment, you have to build it. And so Kevin Thompson is building everything, and then you're making sure the costumes are perfect. You're making sure he wants to shoot live music, not making the movie without shooting live music, which meant that we couldn't shoot during COVID because the musicians were very far apart. And he wanted to shoot on film. So there's a kind of a high degree of execution involved with Bradley Cooper, and he just, I think I can speak for all of us when I say he sort of makes us all better at what we do because he's pushing and driving us toward the vision. And we prepped the movie with 3 years of hair and makeup tests. We did film tests. We did sound tests. He was, again, not making the movie until it was prepped properly, until he could get it right. And I think that shows on screen.
I think it definitely does. And what about collaboration as well between departments and yourself?
Yeah, I think that, again, Brad, having a fierce leader who took the deep dive, who guided us all individually, made sure that we were collaborating with every other department by including us in, obviously Mark, the costume designer, and myself worked closely together with palette and film tests and technical information that we learn in the deep dive with all the research. But the sound that Steve was working on and even the transitions with editing, we talked about all together as being, this piece being like a symphony rather than a film with scenes. It was like, it had movements and it had crescendos and and I think that when we heard music on set and when Bradley would arrive on set after either 2 to 5 hours of makeup before call and arrive as the character of Lenny and block everything and include all of us all the time in what was going on in every day at the beginning of the day, it forced us to have a collaboration like we've never had before.
He also does that. He also does that with the.
Your mic's not on. Mark Hannaby's.
Check, check.
There you
He also does it with, Carey Mulligan and the rest of the cast. They come in and feel, as part of the family as we all are, with just being able to hang out and relax, feel safe, that we're all going to tell the story in the way that it should be told. And so that does elevate everybody's, feeling on set. Some of the sets obviously are very heavy and hard to watch, and they're also hard to film. So, there's a great respect that everybody has as a crew because we all understand the full vision. And that's, I think, for me, that was a huge, takeaway on this film versus other films.
I think he's always constantly communicating what his vision is. I mean, I didn't meet Kevin or Mark. Well, I know you from before. Until recently, but because he was so clear in his communication about the fact that this was a love story, this is about their marriage, it's about family, we all kind of work together. And in editorial, we usually work a little bit later when they're shooting, but I was brought on a lot early on to test a lot of these ideas. And so I was part of the conversation much earlier. So when we actually went to camera to shoot the film proper, we had full ideas and visions about where we wanted to go. And even then, he would come up with new things.
I've been privileged to work with Bradley a few times prior to this film as an actor, and so it was a great thing to be able to work with him as an actor and a director. He's looking out and he's looking in at the same time when you're doing a fitting with him. And so there was a level of trust with us that he knew his other actors were safe with me because I was caught up in the passion that he so communicated to all of us. And so I had his vision of it, and then I brought my vision and then worked with the actor's vision to create, an outside shell for all this inner work that the actors are doing.
And some of you have worked together in the past as well. Is that true?
I mean, I did a Star is Born with Bradley, but yeah.
but with each other.
Yeah, Mark Bridges and I made The Fablemans together with Stephen.
This is my first time with this group.
This is also my first time with this group.
Mine too.
It's a good group.
So let's go back a little bit. This is a project that was initially involved Steven Spielberg, then I don't know if it was consecutively Martin Scorsese. And how did it get to Bradley and to you?
It started in development. Fred Berner and Amy Durning got the rights to the project in 2008 from the Bernstein family, and so they were developing a traditional standard biopic about Leonard Bernstein, and so it just was in development, and they were figuring it out and working on it, and Marty Scorsese was involved at one point, and as a director, and then they were trying to figure it out, and then Marty wasn't going to direct it, and then Josh Singer, who wrote the post for Stephen and I that we worked on, he brought a version of the script to us, and he said, "What do you think?" And Stephen and I had just made, or we were actually in the process of making West Side Story, so we had some, workings with Leonard Bernstein already, and the Bernstein family, and so Stephen signed on pretty quickly to direct it, and he and I were producing it, and we were like, okay, who's going to play Leonard Bernstein? Who could play Leonard Bernstein? And he's like such an icon. What about Bradley Cooper? Great idea. We sent the script to Bradley. He was on vacation with his young daughter at the time, and he read the script in 3 hours and called Stephen and said, "I love the idea. I'm in." So then Stephen was set to direct it. Bradley was going to star in it, and then it became clear that Stephen wasn't going to direct it, and Bradley called Stephen and said, "Hey, if you're not going to direct it, I've just finished this little movie called A Star is Born, and it hadn't come out yet." And he said, "And if, you want to watch the movie, and if you like it, maybe I can throw my hat in the ring to direct it as well as star in it." And so Josh Singer, again, the screenplay writer at that time, and Kate Capshaw, Steven Spielberg's wife, Steven Spielberg and I sat down and watched A Star is Born with Bradley in April. And 20 minutes into the film, Steven got up from his seat and walked over to Bradley and said, "You're directing this fucking movie." And so then that's Bradley Cooper now is the star and the director. And at that point, he had to wrap his head around how he was going to make this movie his, and he just really did not think a traditional biopic was the way to go. And so he researched it, and he and Josh Singer actually, Bradley's idea was like, let's make this a movie about a marriage and make it about their love story. And it's a non-traditional love story, it's a modern love story. And so that, he started over, and he and Josh wrote the script that became the movie that you guys saw tonight.
And the family, were they kind of involved in that process, or they're sitting on the sidelines waiting for information and for you to tell them who's going to direct?
Well, the family they were so wonderful. They were wonderful when we were making West Side Story, and then when we were like, okay, so now we've got, how about this? Bradley Cooper directs and stars as your father in, this movie. And they were like, yes, this is a good idea. But they wanted to hear what Bradley's take was, and Bradley sat down with them and told them his take, and they were like, this is a great way into our family's lives. And so they gave us permission, and they'll say this all the time, they could have just given us permission and shown up at the actual premiere, and we wouldn't have spoken to them, because that's all we have to do when we get the rights to something. Right. But Bradley, again, because he just wants to get it right, he involved the Bernstein kids all the way through. I mean, everybody here really talked to them, and they were able to help with research. They can all talk about all the different things that the Bernstein kids did, but they were involved from beginning to end, like just for research purposes. Like you could call up and say, what was the lipstick that Felicia wore? What was, what were the earrings she was wearing at the Kennedy Center? Things like that.
So
those little rich details. Authenticity. And when he was working on his hair and makeup tests, he would, FaceTime with the kids, and they would just be blown away looking at what they were, looking at, which was their father.
Yeah, no, that's a very personal thing. Kevin, I want to ask you to kind of take a further step on this in terms of the family. I understand that really was their home in Connecticut. And
Yeah.
Yeah, and that must have taken some talking to, I would imagine, or maybe they were just jumped in there. But for you, and I also understand you had to create a lot of incredible things that were mentioned already, including the apartment. Can you speak to that?
Yes, I think having the access to the Connecticut country house where they spent summers and weekends was a really great sort of foundation for how they lived and the intimate details of their life, so we could bring sort of an authenticness again to the other apartments when they're in the city and how they lived. The house in Connecticut was still pretty much the same as it was when the Bernsteins were alive, the parents were alive. The children have kind of kept it a little bit like a museum. His writing studio had been renovated, so we restored that, and we brought all the period details back with certain elements. But Felicia's paintings were on the walls. Snapshots were hanging on the walls. The piano that Bernstein got from his piano teacher when he was a student was still in the living room. So Bradley and I would walk through the house and feel the ghost of what was there. And they weren't fancy. They were, even when they got wealth, they had very large, passionate personalities, and they were artistic and in a very artistic community of friends. But they lived very unpretentiously and very simply, and I think that was displayed in that house. It was one of the things that gave us a non-tangible, emotional attitude about what was inside that family and how they worked. Again, Felicia had a lot of the taste. He didn't care so much. Mark has a great story about that.
It was super intimate.
Yeah.
It was super intimate to be like looking at their clothing, looking at the towels, looking at the pictures that were on the refrigerator in the 70s and 80s that were still on the refrigerator in 2022.
Yeah, and the way that was personified in the film is quite evident and moving. Are there other examples from either of you regarding these personal details?
I think
clothing and others?
you felt the reverence, being there, as opposed to a set that you would go to that would be recreated, and so I think that also elevated everybody's craft on those days that we were there, just to realize this is his life, this is his home,
Yeah, I think, we were given access to the closets, and I have pictures of Jamie holding up these dashiki things that her dad would wear, and sort of these questionable taste jackets that he would wear. And this was after Felicia. I love it in the movie that he's like, oh, Felicia picks out all my clothes. I would be a mess without her. And it was really true. So I love that Bradley added that, and we witnessed it in the closet, and we were able to use one of Felicia's dresses, that blue check dress with the gingham. That was really Felicia's dress that Carey wears in the film when he has to go talk to Jamie. And we had a robe of Lenny's too, but I don't think it ended up in the final cut. But to have that energy on set was amazing, and I think it helped the performances. It was really special, and to get a sense of who these people were by actually seeing and touching their clothes and living in the air that they breathed, really.
Yeah, amazing. I do have one question for you. Could you explain to me what forensic costume design is?
That is a term that I created. And what it is that, we have a well-documented life of Leonard and Felicia, but there are things that aren't answered. So by looking at a tiny picture in Jamie's book of Lenny in a jumpsuit during the 6 months that he left the family to live with Tommy, you practically like Sherlock Holmes looking with the magnifying glass to find out what it is, and reading a biography that talks about a certain situation in their life, or only having 2 photographs of Felicia the night of the mass premiere. And so you're finding these little clues, and then you take a flight of imagination, or you figure out what the rest of that dress looks like, or you find this little piece and use it for dramatic emphasis in a particular scene. So it's that kind of looking for clues. I love crime shows, and I'm using that kind of deductive reasoning to figure out what the clothes are. So that's my forensic costume design.
Makes sense. You should combine the two into a program. So Michelle, I want to ask you, as I kind of referred to in the beginning, that there were ratio changes, color changes. How did you handle that in the editing room, and how was it? Was it a collaboration with? Obviously, you have a team, and Bradley.
I mean, this was a long gestating, like, educational process to find what aspect ratios, black and white, color, shot on film, shot on video. I mean, I worked on this film maybe a year and a half prior to them even shooting it, where we did a lot of makeup tests, camera tests, just trying this material. And what we would do is he would shoot things from the script. And even though it was a test, we would cut it together, and we would make what we would call the proof of concept. And we would try things like, does it work to cut different aspect ratios together? What does 240 look like? We don't end up using 240. Why would we use the aspect ratio of 1:3:3? Can we do it in black and white video? No, film looks amazing. Forget the warmth that you get when you're looking at that image. And we would try all this, and this is all before we would get to camera, and it was amazing to be able to do this and know fully when you're going to shoot it for real that it's going to work. And I think ultimately he ended up wanting to match the time, the period of when the story's taking place, and what maybe you would be seeing at the time, and how when you would go and you do research on them, you would see pictures of them in black and white, or video, like the Morrow interview or the Mike Wallace interview, and you would want to kind of replicate that feeling of what you would be seeing and what aspect ratio and how it would feel. So I think it was just trying to make it feel as real as possible and represent the time and the decades that we cover in this film.
So Steve, you had a big weight on your shoulders. We're talking about a movie that's dealing with arguably one of the most famous musicians, composers, conductors in the world. Yep. Did you feel that in this film, and what it is?
Yeah, I mean, we did A Star Is Born in a a live recording of that film for their performances. And after that movie, I thought, okay, we'll never have to do that again. And he called me, he recapped the story that Kristie told, about Spielberg kind of getting up 20 minutes into screening. And his memory was, oh, shit, I guess he doesn't like the movie, he's leaving. But then he went over and told me he's directing Maestro. So I think when he came and said, we're going to do this live, it's going to be an orchestra, he's going to conduct, and I went, okay, that'll be cool, we can do that. And we got off the phone, and I just sat there for the next 2 years just kind of thinking about it, and, not sleeping much. And then, but yeah, I mean, once you get to it, you realize, it's the same idea that you want to give the audience a feel for the music of Bernstein that you've never felt before. You've never gotten to put the audience in the middle of an orchestra while they're playing, unless you are part of that orchestra. We all hear it on the radio, we all hear it in CDs. It's just a different experience in the theater that you get to be surrounded by it. And so the key takeaway was, let's immerse the audience, but let's do it in a way that's not overly done, so that, you know, you're not just shoving it in everybody's faces. But if you do it where we're just going to fake it the whole time, it's not going to feel special. So we wanted to give the audience that special feeling that he must have felt, you know, being on that podium. So a little bit of pressure.
There were 60 microphones hanging from the ceiling of Ely Cathedral
Yeah.
above the orchestra
Yeah, there's a
and the choir.
500-year-old cathedral, yeah.
I mean, in fact, what you recorded there was the impetus for us to then shoot the rest of the movie, or like re-record the rest of the movie, because what we had in the edit moving forward, maybe before we've finished, was a lot of the original Bernstein recordings that maybe they were 2-track, maybe they were even mono,
Yeah, a lot of
you
mono,
know, and when we were on a mix stage listening to what they recorded with the London Symphony Orchestra, we're like, well, you can't have that and have this other. So we had to do everything else because of how well that was done.
Yeah, we like to create jobs.
Yeah, job security.
Yeah, job creation.
I think we could go on for most of the evening, but I know we have a huge production outside in the street that before the city tears it down, we probably want to have a drink or two. But I suspect that, from what I'm hearing, that all of you would probably like to work with Bradley again, and you're sending him fruit baskets on the holidays and things like that, just to make sure. It does come across, and this is an exquisite film. When is it going to be opening?
November 22nd in theaters and December 20th on Netflix.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the 5 to 7 years that you put into this, and congratulations.